In today's video, we're diving into 5 real shark encounters that will haunt you. From a father's nightmare in the water, captured by his own son, to a man's final moments caught by a drone after his wedding day in the Maldives. But we start with a man whose lifelong obsession with marine life pushed him toward one fatal miscalculation. It was September 14th, 2014, at Gansby, in South Africa's Western Cape, a place marketed as calm water and predictable wildlife, where a clear morning turned into a brief, documented killing that left only fragments to recover and a widening stain. Marek Volin was 34, a warehouse supervisor from the Czech Republic who had never left Central Europe before this trip. Since childhood, he had fixated on seals through library books and documentaries, saving for years to see them in the wild. He avoided cage dives both to save money and because he believed observation without barriers was more honest. The trip goal was simple and finite: film seals from shore, capture one close if luck allowed, and return with footage for his parents and younger brother. Marek planned carefully but trimmed costs wherever possible. He booked a guest house inland and walked to the coast before tour boats launched, believing fewer motors meant fewer sharks near the shallows. He wore a thin wetsuit, no flotation vest, and carried a small GoPro on a waist belt, so his hands stayed free. He had read online warnings yet weighed them against his budget and the calm sea in front of him. His colleagues back home had grown tired of his constant talk about marine life, but they respected his dedication to this dream that had consumed him for decades. The shoreline was a low rock shelf with kelp along the edges, sunlight reflecting off the pale sand beneath clear water. He waded in chest-deep water, deep enough for a vertical ambush. Great white sharks patrol this coast year-round, adults often 15 to 18 feet long and weighing over 2,000 pounds, built for short bursts of speed up to 25 miles per hour. They hunt seals with vertical ambushes, striking from below with a single explosive surge, relying on surprise and a bite force sufficient to crush bone and cause catastrophic trauma in a single strike. In clear water near colonies, their approach can be silent until impact, and a single test bite can be fatal to a human. The water depth, though shallow by human standards, was sufficient for a short, explosive ambush. That morning, a ranger notice posted at the access path warned of recent shark activity following seal pupping. A local fisherman casually told Marek the seals were jumpy at first light. Offshore, several seals porpoised abruptly, slapping back down and clustering tighter than usual. Marek recorded calmly, chest deep, and dismissed the splashing as play behavior. He had studied seal behavior extensively through documentaries and believed he could distinguish between normal activity and distress signals. He edged a few steps forward to keep the rocks framed behind him, turning his hips slightly while checking the camera angle. The water remained flat. No dorsal fin cut the surface. The seals shifted again, then scattered outward. Marek did not retreat. He adjusted the GoPro belt and kept filming. His focus remained on capturing the perfect shot, the kind of footage that would justify years of saving and planning for this single trip. The impact came out of nowhere, from behind and below. A great white surged vertically in a single burst, jaws closing across Marek's midsection. The camera captured the initial moment of the strike, a blur of white and gray filling the frame, before the massive force of the attack crushed the device and snapped the mounting belt. The GoPro was destroyed instantly, its plastic housing cracking under the tremendous pressure of the shark's bite. Marek was dragged under in one pull. His legs kicked once, visible as pale flashes, then vanished. The sound was a low, rushing roar, punctuated by a wet thud as the bite released. The shark did not circle. It turned away, leaving a heavy cloud of blood that spread outward and downward. A tour boat operator idling farther out noticed the sudden dispersion of seals and the spreading blood slick. He cut his engine and radioed emergency services while steering closer, marking the position. Another operator followed. Rescue boats launched within minutes and arrived approximately 20 minutes later. They found fragments of wetsuit, blood, and eventually located partial remains floating nearby, entangled in kelp. The destroyed camera was recovered, with the memory card still intact. The footage was analyzed for investigation. The coroner later described the recovered remains based on physical evidence. Massive trauma consistent with a single predatory bite from a large shark. There was evidence of rapid blood loss and no possibility of survival beyond moments. Death would have occurred within minutes due to catastrophic injury. The local diving community quietly acknowledged the incident as a reminder of the inherent risks in entering waters where apex predators hunt. However, even as these parents mourned their son's obsession with the very creatures that claimed his life, in the Bahamas, an oceanic whitetip would turn a peaceful afternoon swim into a son's most horrific memory. It was July 14, 2016, off the leeward side of Great Inagua, Bahamas, when a calm afternoon on open water narrowed into something irreversible, captured by a cheap camera until the moment everything went wrong. Evan McMaster was 42, a freelance sailor and delivery skipper who made a living moving other people's boats between islands and ports. He had a reputation for being steady, unflappable, and practical, the kind of captain owners trusted with keys and schedules. He kept his gear simple, preferred paper charts to tablets, and believed most danger at sea came from weather or engines, not from the water itself. On this trip, he was not working. He had brought his 14-year-old son, Noel, along as crew in name only, hoping to give him time offshore before high school pulled him away. This was their third father-son sailing trip, and Evan treasured these moments of teaching Noel about navigation and seamanship. McMaster had crossed the Caribbean enough times to be comfortable stopping offshore instead of running all the way to a marina. He knew these deeper waters occasionally attracted large pelagic sharks, but he treated the calm conditions and clear visibility as sufficient precaution. He had swum off boats before, sometimes to cool off, sometimes to scrape growth from a rudder. He told Noel to keep the camera ready because he wanted to test it, an old digicam with a weak zoom, and because he liked documenting small moments. This father-son trip represented a rare opportunity to share his love of sailing before Noel became too busy with teenage life. The sea lay flat around the anchored sailboat, sunlight reaching down through clear water where small fish flashed and vanished beneath Evan as he floated near the stern ladder. The ladder rungs were spaced roughly 14 inches apart, a standard small sailboat configuration. Oceanic white-tip sharks patrol open water rather than reefs, built for distance with long pectoral fins and a blunt snout, typically 6 to 10 feet long. Their jaws can deliver a bite force exceeding 1,200 pounds per square inch, capable of tearing through muscle and bone in a single strike, and their serrated teeth are designed to grasp and shred flesh efficiently. They're curious and persistent, known to approach slowly and investigate with bumps before biting when potential prey does not flee. As Evan swam back toward the ladder, small fish tightened their circle beneath him, a subtle cue of disturbance that foreshadowed danger. Evan had taught Noel to watch for such signs during their sailing lessons, but neither father nor son recognized the warning at that moment. The shark rose from below without splashing, its pale underside filling the frame for a second before it bumped Evan's left leg. The contact pushed him sideways. He laughed once, audible on the recording. Then the shark turned and bit into his calf. The sound was dull and wet. Evan screamed and kicked hard, water erupting as he reached for the ladder with both hands. Blood appeared immediately in the water, creating a faint plume that would have attracted the shark's curiosity and reinforced predatory behavior. The shark circled within seconds and struck again, this time targeting the upper thigh and hip region. The bite was deeper, more devastating. Evan's hands slapped the ladder rungs, slipping as his coordination failed rapidly. The violent thrashing and Noel's panicked movements caused the old digicam to slip from his trembling hands, tumbling onto the deck where it struck the metal cleat and shattered, the LCD screen going black and ending the recording abruptly. Noel's panicked shouting seemed to disturb the shark, which disengaged and moved off into deeper water. Evan went limp, floating face down, one arm still brushing the ladder. Noel, overwhelmed and terrified, struggled with the radio controls his father had shown him, his hands shaking as he tried to remember the emergency channel. It took him several attempts to make contact, his voice breaking as he tried to give their position. The boy's distress was evident to the Coast Guard operator, who remained on the line, providing guidance while coordinating rescue efforts. A fishing vessel that had been working the area responded to the distress call and arrived approximately 30 to 40 minutes later. By the time Evan was pulled aboard, there was no pulse and no response to attempts at aid. The fishing crew, experienced in marine emergencies, attempted resuscitation, but quickly recognized the severity of the injuries made survival impossible. The coroner's lay report listed catastrophic blood loss, multiple penetrating bite wounds to the lower extremities and torso, and rapid loss of consciousness consistent with hypovolemic shock. The injuries and blood loss were consistent with a predator investigating prey via 2 decisive strikes, leaving no realistic chance of survival without immediate advanced medical intervention. Friends from the sailing community assisted with logistics, returning gear and handling paperwork, while the family remained out of view. There were no memorials on the water, no markers placed, only routine advisories issued about swimming near anchored vessels in deep water. Local coverage focused on boating safety and offshore swimming, leaving Evan unnamed. The family returned home quietly. To this day, Noel still sails occasionally, finding comfort and freedom on the water, though he never swims far from shore and always maintains radio contact with other vessels. The incident fundamentally changed his relationship with the ocean, transforming it from a place of adventure into something that demanded constant respect and vigilance. As the son continues to sail the very waters that claimed his father in Maui, a man would discover that even the most familiar waters can hide a tiger shark's silent ascent from the abyss below. It was October 18, 2013, off the south shore of Maui, when a quiet stretch of water used daily by swimmers and snorkelers narrowed into a single point of failure, witnessed only by the silence that followed. Jonah Adrian Loxley was 29, a night shift grocery clerk in Kahului who slept through mornings and used daylight hours for the ocean. Snorkeling was his routine release. He owned his gear outright, maintained it carefully, and logged hours in the same coastal zone where he felt patterns mattered. On this day off, he planned to collect reef footage for a personal project, a short montage he hoped to edit together as proof he could finish something creative. His co-workers knew him as someone who talked constantly about his underwater filming, showing them blurry phone videos of fish and coral formations. He had been working on this montage for months, dreaming of submitting it to a local film festival to finally gain recognition for his artistic vision. Jonah had snorkeled the South Shore dozens of times without incident, often alone, often filming downward. He trusted familiarity and visibility. His decisions were not impulsive. They were built from repetition. He checked conditions, noted calm seas, and entered from a public access point where a few other snorkelers were scattered across the reef. He intended to drift, film turtles and coral, and be back on shore before afternoon winds picked up. He carried no float or spotter, likely believing the shallow reef and clear water reduced risk. The water was glassy above a sloping reef that dropped abruptly into deeper blue, sunlight thinning as the bottom fell away beneath him. Tiger sharks are large coastal predators common around Hawaii, frequently exceeding 12 feet and capable of short bursts over 20 miles per hour. Their powerful jaws are adapted to bite and hold, often approaching from depth and striking upward when investigating unfamiliar movement. A single exploratory bite can sever muscle and major blood vessels. They are known to patrol reef edges where the shallow water meets the deep, hunting for wounded fish and investigating unusual disturbances. There were signs Jonah might have weighed differently. A posted advisory mentioned recent shark sightings offshore. Jonah must have noticed fewer fish near the edge, but somehow kept filming, angling his camera downward toward turtles grazing below. His attention narrowed to the screen, his body floating horizontal, legs trailing behind. He had become so focused on capturing the perfect shot that he lost awareness of his surroundings, a common mistake among underwater photographers. As he drifted over the lip of the reef, the footage showed the bottom falling away and then nothing but blue. The camera caught a faint shadow rising from below, sharpening only in the last second. Jonah never turned. There was no evasive movement captured before impact. The shadow grew larger, more defined, until it resolved into the unmistakable silhouette of a large tiger shark ascending from the depths. The strike came from below, a sudden lift and wrench that snapped Jonah's body sideways. The shark bit cleanly through his upper thigh just below the hip. The bite severed the femoral artery, causing massive blood loss that would lead to unconsciousness within seconds to a minute. The violent impact and Jonah's reflexive thrashing tore the camera from his grip, the wrist strap snapping under the sudden force. The waterproof camera tumbled through the water column, its recording continuing as it spun end over end, capturing disorienting flashes of blood, bubbles, and reef before striking a coral head and going dark. Jonah screamed once, a sharp sound cut short by water, and kicked reflexively, sending bubbles and sand upward. A dense red plume exploded around his legs, expanding faster than his movements. His fins lost rhythm immediately. He tried to kick upward, but coordination failed rapidly, his legs moving independently before slowing. The shark released and disappeared into the blue. Jonah's motions weakened quickly. His breathing became labored, then stopped. He floated face down, motionless, before drifting with the current toward deeper water. Other snorkelers in the area noticed the blood cloud spreading across the reef approximately 10 minutes later. One surfaced and shouted toward shore, waving frantically. Calls were placed to emergency services, but the remote location and coordination delays meant rescue personnel didn't arrive by boat until nearly 30 minutes after the initial sighting. By then, Jonah had drifted beyond the immediate search area. His body was recovered later that afternoon by a Coast Guard helicopter search. The coroner report cited massive hemorrhage from a severed femoral artery, rapid exsanguination, and loss of consciousness within seconds to a minute due to hypovolemic shock. The camera was eventually found days later by a local diver. In the weeks that followed, marine biologists reiterated known risks of snorkeling near drop-offs without surface support. The incident was folded into statistics rather than memory. Jonah's unfinished montage remained a file name on a hard drive, never edited, the project abandoned. After Jonah's blood had stained Maui's waters all for a filming project, in Egypt, a technician with barely 30 dives under his belt would soon discover that lagging behind the group for the perfect photograph can attract the attention of a predator with far deadlier intentions. It was December 12, 2018, near Marsa Alam, Egypt, when the calm, clear waters of the Red Sea concealed a sudden and fatal encounter that unfolded beyond the sight of witnesses, known only by its aftermath. Radu Ionescu was 41, a Romanian electrical technician who worked long hours on construction projects and used brief budget travel as a rare outlet. He had logged fewer than 30 dives in his life, but approached each methodically, adhering closely to group rules and safety briefings. His reputation among fellow divers was quiet competence. He was careful with gear, patient in planning, and habitually lingered behind the group to photograph reef formations, often missing cues that the group was moving on. His diving logbook showed meticulous attention to detail, recording water temperature, visibility, and marine life sightings with the precision of an engineer. This Red Sea trip represented his most ambitious diving expedition yet, and he had spent weeks researching the best photography techniques for coral formations. Ionescu was deliberate but not reckless. He followed instructions, checked tanks and regulators, and made mental notes of exit points. His choice to hang back while photographing the reef was understandable given his objective, though it increased risk because he was temporarily isolated from immediate assistance. He entered the water from a small anchored boat near a dive site adjacent to a shallow reef, intending to surface briefly while waiting for the next group rotation. His decisions reflected inexperience in open water judgment rather than disregard for safety. Black-tip reef sharks are common in Red Sea waters, typically 4 to 6 feet long, with distinctive black-tipped fins and powerful jaws capable of inflicting severe wounds. They are curious and opportunistic, often investigating isolated divers or unusual movement, especially when individuals are separated from groups. While attacks are rare, they can be aggressive when investigating potential prey. These sharks are known to patrol the edges of reefs, particularly in areas where the shallow coral gives way to deeper blue water. Dive staff had briefed the group on occasional sightings of large reef sharks and recommended remaining in visual contact at all times. Posted advisories warned about deep channels and the importance of staying near the group. Small fish scattered suddenly, a natural response to large predators, but Radu focused on adjusting his camera and regulator, scanning the reef rather than the water column above the drop-off. He had been particularly excited about this dive, having researched the site extensively and hoping to capture images of the vibrant coral formations that made this area famous among underwater photographers. As he surfaced alone, arm extended to manipulate his underwater camera housing, the attack occurred beyond the view of other divers or boat crew. The first contact was sudden. The black-tip reef shark seized Radu's right arm, dragging him downward briefly. The camera, still recording in video mode, captured the initial moments of the attack, the shark's distinctive black-tipped fins, and the sudden explosion of bubbles and blood, before the violent thrashing caused Radu to lose his grip on the housing. The camera sank rapidly toward the reef below, its recording ending when it struck the coral, and the lens housing cracked, flooding the device. He surfaced, screaming, kicking, and twisting, trying to stay afloat, but the water around him became dense with blood. The arm was deeply lacerated and functionally disabled, hanging useless at his side. His movements became erratic as he struggled to stay afloat with one arm disabled. The shark struck again, this time targeting the lower torso and flank. The bite was decisive and fatal. Blood spread rapidly, saturating the water in a wide, cloud-like plume. Radu's movement stopped entirely as he drifted with the current. The shark disengaged immediately after the second strike, moving away from the area without prolonged contact. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds from first contact to the shark's departure. A dive guide conducting a routine surface check noticed the blood slick spreading across the dive site approximately 15 minutes later. Emergency protocols were activated, and the dive boat reached the coordinates within 20 minutes of the initial discovery. By the time staff reached Radu, injuries were catastrophic. The right arm deeply lacerated and functionally disabled. Severe trauma to the lower torso and flank consistent with a single powerful bite. There was no pulse, no respiration, and resuscitation was not attempted due to the injuries being unsurvivable. The coroner's assessment described extensive soft tissue trauma to the upper extremity and torso, rapid hemorrhage, and cardiovascular collapse consistent with immediate incapacitation from blood loss. Wounds indicated 2 distinct bites without extended contact, matching known blacktip reef shark investigative behavior. Coverage remained local and factual, noting the presence of a blacktip reef shark and emphasizing adherence to group diving protocols. Radu's family received notification through embassy channels and returned to Romania quietly. The dive staff conducted internal reviews, but did not issue public statements. The site remains open under routine advisories. Tourists dive and surface unaware of the brief, fatal episode in the deceptively calm waters of the Red Sea. His damaged camera housing was recovered days later. Yet even as Radu's mangled body was pulled from the bloodied waters, in the pristine lagoons of the Maldives, a man would soon discover that even a picture-perfect paradise can hide a tiger shark's patient hunger beneath crystal-clear surfaces. It was June 18, 2017, in a shallow lagoon off Ba Atoll, Maldives, when a calm, sunlit stretch of water turned instantly lethal during what should have been a perfect wedding memory. Lars Storli was 33, a logistics coordinator from Bergen, Norway, who spent most of his workdays scheduling shipments, coordinating teams, and troubleshooting transport problems. He was methodical, reliable, and liked to avoid confrontation, traits that made him agreeable and cautious in unfamiliar situations. Friends described him as accommodating, especially during the wedding events, where he followed instructions precisely to avoid embarrassment. He was not a confident swimmer, had minimal open ocean experience, and had avoided snorkeling earlier in the honeymoon. His participation in the lagoon swim was hesitant, encouraged only after wedding staff assured him the water was shallow, calm, and clear. To satisfy the photographer's request for a surface level and remain presentable in the drone footage, Lars agreed to enter the water. He wore light wedding clothing and stayed close to the boat ladder, intending to keep his feet on the sandy bottom. His decisions were cautious by his standards, understandable for someone anxious about swimming in open water, but they required constant attention to depth and positioning, something he underestimated while focusing on the camera and drone direction. The wedding party had been celebrating for hours, and the tropical setting seemed to promise nothing but beauty and safety. The lagoon was sunlit and glassy, water clear to 10 feet, with pale sand and scattered coral heads. Beneath the surface, it dropped off slightly toward a deeper channel, an unremarkable change to an untrained eye, but enough for pelagic predators to patrol. The wedding photographer had specifically chosen this location for its pristine beauty and apparent safety, having used it for dozens of similar shoots without incident. Tiger sharks are large, predatory species common in tropical waters, typically 12 to 14 feet long, capable of bursts exceeding 20 miles per hour. They have powerful jaws with serrated teeth designed to grasp and tear flesh, approaching objects or humans with slow, persistent curiosity. They often strike from below, targeting limbs or torso, and their exploratory behavior can escalate rapidly if an individual is immobile or unable to evade. These apex predators are known to patrol shallow lagoons, particularly during high tide, when they can access areas normally too shallow for their massive frames. Several warnings were present that Lars did not fully account for. Local guides had mentioned occasional tiger shark sightings in the lagoon channels. Coral heads and fish scattering indicated nearby activity, but he remained focused on adjusting posture and clothing for the drone, keeping his gaze upward rather than scanning beneath him. The boat crew, preoccupied with coordinating guests and camera angles, did not notice his gradual drift off the shallow bottom, a drift of only a few meters, but enough that his feet no longer contacted the sand, leaving him fully suspended in the water. As the drone hovered 20 feet above, Lars repositioned, his body angled slightly farther from the ladder. His hands tugged at his shirt to remove wrinkles, and his legs floated freely beneath him. The drone operator, focused on framing the shot, continued filming as the water suddenly erupted around Lars. The tiger shark struck from below, and the surface exploded with violent splashing. The drone captured the initial chaos from above, thrashing water, spreading blood, and Lars's desperate attempts to reach the boat ladder before the operator, shocked by what he was witnessing, jerked the controls. The drone lurched sideways, lost altitude, and clipped a nearby tree, tumbling into the foliage. By then, a second massive strike had erupted around Lars, more violent than the first. The water turned completely red, and Lars's movements ceased entirely. The wedding guests on the boat screamed in horror. The celebration instantly transformed into a nightmare. Within moments, Lars floated face down, motionless. The crew rushed to launch the emergency tender. The small boat reached Lars within 12 minutes, but upon retrieval, he exhibited catastrophic trauma to the lower extremities and pelvis. There was no pulse, no respiration. He had gone into cardiac arrest within minutes of the initial attack and could not be revived. The coroner's report described complete severing of the femoral artery, extensive soft tissue damage to the pelvis and upper thighs, and rapid cardiovascular collapse. Wounds were consistent with 2 powerful strikes from a large tiger shark, resulting in immediate incapacitation and death within minutes from massive blood loss. Authorities issued a brief advisory to the local diving and swimming community and suspended lagoon activities quietly for several days. Lars' bride returned to Norway within days, His funeral was private, attended only by family and close friends. The wedding footage was never completed, the crashed drone serving as the only documentation of the tragic event that transformed a celebration into a nightmare. The other wedding guests struggled with trauma counseling for months afterward, many never returning to tropical waters. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here for more haunting encounters from the deep.